Last year in late April, I was on my way to a meeting out of province. And I'd gotten up so early that my children were still asleep. In my pre-caffeinated haste, I got my car stuck on the last snowbank in Halifax right outside of my house. The next 3 hours were spent with my neighbors trying to get my car off of that snowbank. So between rocking my car back and forth, I looked over at my house and I saw my eldest daughter, Lena, staring out the window. And I waved, and I just got back this scowl. So I ran over to the house to see if she was okay. And I was met by an enraged little 5-year-old. "Mom," she says. She's out on the porch in her bare feet. "Yesterday was Earth Day, and we're supposed to take care of the Earth. And I see you. I see the smoke going out and out and out of your car. You're ruining everything." And I looked back, and it was one of those cold days where you can see the exhaust billowing out into the air. And I prepared to defend myself. I felt like I had a pretty good excuse after all. But then I looked at her, and I just knelt down, and I hugged her, and I said, "Oh, Lena, I'm so proud of you." She was outraged about really one of the biggest issues of our day, the destruction of our planet, our one and only home. And what I didn't tell her, what she doesn't know yet, is that the last 10 years were the very hottest we've ever recorded, and last year being the hottest. That we are facing an extinction crisis. The warming oceans and deforestation and the changing ecosystems are contributing to what scientists are observing to be mass extinction of some of our species. Between 50 and 55 species are going extinct every year, and suffering. We're seeing so many people, millions of them, displaced by natural and environmental disasters. Lena's frustration was about how she thinks the world should be, or at least about how she thinks the people in her community and her family should act. Children see themselves as full of potential. They see the world as full of potential. And it is, isn't it? I mean, just take the sun. 1 hour of its energy is enough to power global energy needs for an entire year. Or clean tech. Economists are telling us that we have enough clean tech right now to move our economies to a much lower carbon economy. And we have these natural systems in nature that are perfect models for how our built environments could look. So what happens between that youthful optimism and energy and adulthood? Well, we start to understand complexity. We start to see trade-offs, for example. We understand that we need a car because we need to get to work. We understand the limitations of 4-year election cycles. We start to demand less from our politicians. And we start to doubt. We start to doubt, will this be enough? Can I make a difference? And doubt can be a very important thing. It can ground us in reality. We don't want to be hopeful when there isn't really hope. But the question becomes, how do we grow up understanding complexity and nuance and not become that person that says change is not possible? The task is too big. It's someone else's job. How do we mature, understanding the influence of power and politics and ego and finance, and not become that person who dismisses ideas as idealistic and naive? So I started to think about hope. I don't love the word, to be honest. I've thought about it a lot over the years. I've thought about either my own lack of it at times, how to generate it in others, how to fake it so I can keep doing what I'm doing in my work. And it comes down to this. How do you work on climate change policy, education, and research without hope for 10 years, as I have? But then again, how do you come face to face with climate change as it stands right now and have any hope? What I've come to observe over the last few years is that real hope, productive hope, is less of an ad hoc emotion as in, I'm feeling hopeful today. Nor is it a state that we might suddenly reach if we just try hard enough and suddenly flick a switch and feel hopeful all the time, sort of like an enlightened state. What I propose is that something I call mature hope is actually a discipline, and something that we need to cultivate in ourselves on a daily basis, or we will lose it. And I also think that mature hope is as important to the climate movement and the transformation of our world as clean technology, as green finance, and regulations and policies. I work for a wonderful environmental NGO. My full-time job is developing and supporting programs that help engage the public, institutions, and leaders how to tread more lightly on the earth, essentially. We do a lot of things, but a big part of what we do is we engage youth. Now, youth are an awesome go-to for energy and hope. They were originally kind of my fallback plan, so I thought if I could just hang around young people enough, I could sponge off their energy, and then, they'd be my hope vehicle. But this isn't super practical when it comes to the workplace and the professional environment, nor is it altogether necessary for what I was really wanting to learn from them. We've spoken to tens of thousands of youth over the years, and what I've learned from them is more of an approach. And it goes something like this. When you talk to a group of kids and you ask them a question to something they don't know the answer to, almost every single time they will come up with some kind of an answer. So I was talking to this group of kids about sea level rise, asking them what can we do about it when it's threatening to flood a lot of our coastal areas and inundate some of our small island countries. They thought about it. These are little kids, like 6, 7. Big topic for that age, but they're up for it. And they said, well, maybe we should water the plants with that water, all the extra water. And if they don't like the salt, one of them said, maybe we could take the salt out. Can we take the salt out of the water? And another group of kids who I was talking to said, we were talking about bats, and there are certain species of bats that are threatening to go, they may be going extinct. And so I said, what can we do about that? What can we do about the bats? And they said, well, we should build them some nice homes with bunk beds that they like to sleep in. So their answers might be a little unrealistic at times. They might even sometimes say, I don't know, but they almost never say, you just can't do that. That's not possible. They don't doubt yet. They see the potential in the world. Their answers are humble also, so they often ask questions. They want to collaborate. They're optimistic. For children, this comes naturally. For adults to foster that kind of hope takes some serious intention. But I think that if, as adults, we can harness some of that energy and that optimism and combine it with our experience and wisdom, then there are actually opportunities for confronting despair and hopelessness in the day-to-day transactions that occur between people. And I observe this because I think the opposite is also true. I see the barriers to hope and connection and action in the day-to-day transactions that occur between millions and millions of people every day, whether it's responding on social media, or talking to a neighbor over the fence, or a keynote at a conference, or a TED Talk. I'll give you 2 examples of where I've noticed the effects that these interactions can have. I was at a conference last year about how to turn our regional economy around, how to engage young people, innovation, new ideas. And I was in a breakout session about the role of politics. In my small group, I brought up this idea of a failure report, which some organizations are choosing to publish instead of annual reports every year, in an attempt to bring light to the idea that failure is a necessary piece of the innovation puzzle. And to my left was an energetic millennial. To my right was a seasoned politician and a thought leader and an elder in our community. And the millennial said, wouldn't it be a game changer if politicians could publish failure reports every year? To which the elder said, and remember, this is a conference about supporting and innovation and developing new ideas. He said, that is so idealistic and frankly, completely naive. I was like, oh my God, what am I experiencing right now? Harness the lens of exploration and creativity of a child and maybe some humility. What if instead he had said, I worry that politicians' reliance on public funds would make it very hard for them to ever talk about failure. How could we work around that? I'll tell you what that would have done. It would have validated the millennials' idea, shown it respect. It would have also matured the idea by imparting some of the wisdom that the elder had. And most importantly, it would have built a connection between these 2 people. Who knows, maybe they would have exchanged business cards and gone out for a beer later. Isn't that really how most great ideas start anyway? And the second example was from a conference about engaging young people in the climate change movement. and the main speeches were over, and a senior and respected professor got up to say a few words before the real work was about to begin. And he said, "You have seen the challenges that we face. My time is past. It's up to you, the youth of today, to change the world. It's up to you to make sure we turn this thing around." I think he was trying to be inspiring, empowering even. But what that message ends up doing is making youth feel utterly overwhelmed by the responsibility of it, and frankly frustrated by the handing off of the problem. Research is showing us that feelings of depression towards climate change among youth are epidemic. We can't afford to have that happen. What if instead that professor had said, "You've seen the challenges that are before us. It's not up to you. It's up to us. My generation are making business investments and policy decisions right now. Your generation have new knowledge and new ideas and energy. Let's go into the rest of this conference dedicated to work with each other and be inspired by each other and get better at what we're all doing right now." The first idea, that youth are our only hope, is to me an indication that we have lost hope, that youthful optimism we had got disappointed, perhaps as Lena did when she saw me polluting. Over time, I think these disappointments can build, and they, over time without intention, can result in fear and despair. And I get that. I've been there. I've been in that situation where a fresh, young, energetic face at work was frustrating, where I wanted to say, "That will never work. We tried that 5 years ago and it failed." And to be honest with you, I didn't just want to say that. I did say that once, and I was devastated with myself. So how do we call upon this mature hope when we need to? Well, it takes intention, like many other things in your life, like being healthy, being a caring neighbor, being a good friend, being an authentic leader or teacher. I'll speak about a situation last year to illustrate how I had to kind of work through this myself. I had the amazing privilege of being at the Paris Climate Conference. Going in, I wasn't altogether optimistic that every single leader of the world would agree on a climate change treaty. But while I was there and afterwards, I had the deep impression that something major had shifted at that conference. When I got back, I was met with some skepticism and bordering on cynicism from some people I really respect. And I had to figure this out. Their thoughts were that Paris wasn't actually going to change anything, that it wasn't successful. And I was speaking about this, so I needed to decide if I was wrong, and do I need to change my perspective on this? What I decided to do was apply a different lens and try to contextualize the victories that I had seen. And what I saw was an imperfect treaty, imperfect leaders, and an imperfect international system. But here's what else I saw. I saw the leaders of 150 countries land on opening day to launch the Global Paris Climate Conference just weeks after terrorists attacked and killed 130 people in that same city. That was bold, and that was humbling. I saw senior officials from every single country in the world working for the very first time together around the clock for 2 weeks to eventually come out with consensus on a treaty that says we will move our economies off of fossil fuels as quickly as we can. That was a triumph for creativity and collaboration. And I saw tens of thousands of people in that city, representing millions of people across the world, working on solutions. Countries moving to 100% renewable energy, communities putting solar panels on straw huts, businesses working to remake our agricultural systems so that we can feed more people with less in a more sustainable way. And small movements that have gained momentum, like this group of students who started at a few campuses to ask their universities to remove their investments from fossil fuels. This has now grown to 500 institutions and $3.4 trillion in assets that have been divested from the fossil fuel sector. Someone dared to think that these initiatives would have an impact. Someone dared to hope beyond their doubt. And whether you think those individual actions are the answer or not, whether they'll be enough or not, they are movement. They are a big movement in the same general direction, a transformed world. One thing I know is that transformation of this kind is going to require alliance not on the individualism that we have built over the last 150 years in our culture, but a deep connection with each other and with all living things. That connection in the face of fear and doubt and cynicism is very hard. And it takes intention, as it did when I chose to validate Lena instead of justifying myself, which was very tempting. Mature hope is not the need to have all of the answers or see the ultimate solution. In fact, I think it's about letting go of that. But it is a lens through which we try to see things, a lens that can help us look closer, dig deeper, think bigger. And a lens it's a skill. And like any other skill, when we practice it, we start to perfect it. A dear friend and colleague of mine, Erin, said to me once, "I choose hope, because if we don't, we won't get anywhere." So, is it a burden to be alive right now? Or is it a great time to be alive right now? We get to reimagine every single thing we do. We get to completely remake it. So can we dare to be hopeful? Thank you.